wanted to talk about some things that have been on my mind recently. Um, One topic is one topic is about how I've shifted living my life from my life being directed from thinking to letting my life be directed by my felt experience. And that shift has been very profound for me. Hmm. In life, we can let what we do be guided by the mind. And the mind is a powerful tool that is great for problem solving, making sense of things, explaining things. Basically, it's a story making engine that makes sense of our reality. And it's a very powerful tool. And it's been a very amazing guide on my journey of making sense of my life and my experience, especially when it's tricky or confusing or challenging. But it's one thing to let it guide you instead of letting it rule the way you live. And I would offer a set of alternative compasses or guideposts or signals to live your life from. And they are felt in the body. For example, you may have heard someone talk about the heart space. And, maybe 5 years ago, if someone talked to me about that, I would have a natural aversion to talking about that, or a natural aversion to taking in what they have to say and dismissing it as strange. But the fact of the matter is that we all have these systems. The body is an intelligent creation, and there are many intelligences that the body holds. For example, the heart space. It's very mammalian. It's a signal of intimacy, connection, and what is intimacy? Intimacy is connection that is very close, I would say. It is a way of blurring the lines. When you're intimate with someone, there's a blurred line between where you start and where they end. And the more time you spend with someone, the more time you interact with them, the more you become like them. We are mimetic creatures, mimetic beings, and I would argue that, and many others would also agree with this, that what sets human beings apart from other animals is our capacity to imitate. The word ape comes from the word for imitate. They share a common root. Monkey see, monkey do. And as we live our lives, we take in the patterns of behavior, the ways of being, the energy of other people that we interact with. And we are constantly downloading this information from many sources, from people in your life, from the phone screen that you look at daily, if you do that, from your television set, if you do that. And they are all sources of content that you are downloading. And in the same way that someone might say that you are what you eat, your psyche, your mind, your personality is what you experience. So in the same way that we have an idea around dieting, around food, being careful about what you eat, what you put into your body, I would say that there's something equally important about your information diet or your experiential diet. Like, what are you allowing into your life? What are you opening yourself to? And to bring it back to the heart space is about, it's related to love, and it's a container, I would say, and also a portal and a channel of love. And what is love? In a lot of ways, love is related to attraction. It's closeness, familiarity. It's about, it's the glue that holds the universe together, in a sense. It's what attracts things and binds them. It's a binding force. And people that you love, kind of like the way gravity pulls matter together or planets, the force of love pulls you closer to things that I would say ultimately serve you. Things that you love serve you. And the heart space is a felt sense, at the very least, of how open or closed you are to different things in your life. When you are close to someone you care about, you don't have to take my word for it, just become more aware of your body. Take a second to breathe a little bit slower, which tends to help with feeling your body. Or put your hand on your chest, or just try to bring your attention to that place. Or even just be a little bit more open to being aware of what's happening. And I would venture to guess that if you were to do any of those things, you would start to notice that there is a felt sense right around here that people call the heart space. And you can tell when it's open and when it's closed. Our nervous systems are what make us human beings and differentiate us from computer programs, other forms of life that are not embodied. And I think that in this age of artificial intelligence, this age of technological advancement in the last 100 years, um, it is a potent time to remember what we are and to see through contrast, by seeing what we are not in some sense, that can help us define who we are and for us to remember who we are. And it doesn't surprise me that it's at least for myself personally, I spent a lot of my time before the few years ago really paying attention to technology, systems, algorithms, abstract thinking, things like that, and not being in my body, not being in connection with people as much as I am now. And I'm deeply curious about what makes us humans. And I think it took me, in a sense, I had to go all the way to the end of that journey to start to look inward, because my curiosity took me all the way to the end of it. Not to the end, but very far along that path. And from that vantage point of being curious about the world outside of me and trying to understand it, and what is understanding? I would say that it's basically understanding. If you understand something, you can model it, you can predict it, you can predict its behavior. And that is kind of what physics is all about. Physics is about understanding reality, modeling reality. If you apply a force to an object, what happens? It is a way of looking into the crystal ball, in a way of looking into the future. It's all about understanding the future. It's future oriented. And yeah, it's curious. As I talk about it, I'm noticing how I'm making up this story, or like making up this idea, and it feels true. As I'm talking about, I feel in my body this kind of sense of profundity, which, to be concrete, I typically, when you feel the sense of chill, like chills, that is like an expression of awe or wonder at something profound, something big, something shifting, something important. The same feeling you would get maybe if you stood in front of a mountain that's looming over you. I'm having that feeling right now. And I am in awe of this idea that as I spent a lot of time exploring the world outside of me, it's as though I was looking further and further away from me to see what is ahead of me, what is in the future. And technology, in a lot of ways, is future oriented. And after doing that, I started to come back. I went all the way out, and then I started to come back. And then as I came back, now I've spent a lot of time in the present. And obviously this way of talking about time is, I'm sure, very rudimentary, but I think it's just to illustrate the point of how my attention has shifted towards looking forward to looking right down at myself, right into myself. And in the last few years, I've spent a lot of time with my attention right here in my body, with myself, being aware of my thoughts, my feelings, my beliefs, my desires. And so I was interested in the world outside of me, and now I'm interested in the world within, the world inside of me. And it isn't entirely, it is a different world to explore, and it is very deep, and there's a lot to look into. Just as you could spend, many lifetimes exploring the world outside of you, going to beautiful places, exploring beautiful ideas, um, meeting beautiful people. There's a another vast world that is the inner world that I think I avoided because it was so challenging to do so. As soon as I started doing that, I actually very quickly felt um, a deep sense of panic, a deep sense of anxiety, and there's a lot of uncomfortable things to be with in the inner world, and also scary things and confusing things, but also blissful things. All of the colors are there, and yeah. So my point is that I was looking forward. Now I'm here in the moment, in the present moment, and my guess is that the next step is to go backwards and to remember what I am and how I came to where I am today in this time and in this moment. And that's a natural, I think, route to take psychologically, to look forward, to be future oriented, to come to the present, and then to look back. And there's something smooth and interesting about that route. And I also noticed and heard from many people that that is a common route in some sense to take through your therapeutic journeys. You often will do a lot of inner work, being with things from the past, for example, traumatic experiences, things that made you who you are today, your relationship to your parents. And then after working through that, many people often find that there's a whole nother layer of things to integrate, challenges to integrate, and they involve, the challenges of your family tree, like the people that came before you, your ancestors. And yeah, there's like a through line through the human experience going backwards through the people that came before you, your ancestors, and it goes all the way back to, I imagine in some sense, the beginning of time itself, or whatever you like to call that. And there's this huge arc of experience that we have the potential to integrate, and it's a never-ending journey. Like most things in life, I've come to find that they are never-ending seemingly, and that's a challenging thing for me to acknowledge, because there's something about getting to the end, the finality of something, that is quite satisfying. And on the flip side, I mean, there's a potential framing of looking at something that's never ending as is deeply satisfying as well. But anyways, so what I'm trying to say is that there are other systems of intelligence that we can, honor, be aware of, to take joy in, to notice. And I'm, the heart space is one of them. Colloquially, we talk about the gut also, like I have a gut feeling about this. And each of these systems, I would say, has a unique thing to offer you. And that kind of, I think, is a bit easier to talk about when it comes to talking about feelings. Feelings are sensations in the body. There are there's a whole color palette of feelings. The primary colors of them are, I would say, there's many ways to talk about this, but one way is sad, nad, glad. Those are like maybe the red, blue, and yellow, the primary colors of feelings. And I also like to add disgust as a separate feeling that is a bit distinct from those three. And I would say that feelings are signals, and they come from these different systems of the body. We use our senses to make sense of the world, and each sense making apparatus has its own value. For example, let's kind of mesh these two things, feelings and our senses, or feelings in our body systems. For example, the feeling of disgust, I would say, is very much related to the sense of smell, to your gut, to your digestive system. And in a way, the digestive system, your nose, these things are systems of integrating things that are outside of you and making them you, transforming and integrating them, bringing in energy, bringing in nutrients, bringing in the building blocks of life. But generally speaking, taking things outside of you, bringing them into this thing that is you, or one thing that you could call you. And your nose is a way of sussing out if that thing belongs in your system, belongs in your being. And that system is not just useful for making sense about food, but it's also, maybe the right word would be co-opted by the mind to, or maybe it's, maybe I don't know much about this, but I would imagine that it could be that it's the other way around, that the brain is built on top of these foundational systems. I know that smell is one of the oldest senses, and basically, this smell, this feeling of distaste is a signal that, let's say you find someone or something distasteful, that feeling is a signal to you that basically that thing is not compatible with your body, with your being. And that's something that you can be aware of when you're interacting with people, when you're interacting with the world. And in the same way that if you were to eat some food that's, old and spoiled, you try to bring that into your body will reject it. And in the same way, if you find someone distasteful, it's a signal, I would say, that you really ought to, I would really highly recommend that you listen to this, that this person or behavior or whatever that you are encountering is not currently something that is compatible with who you are. And it's risky to try to integrate it. It's not to say that you will never integrate it, or that I wouldn't recommend that you never be with things like that. All these things are signals, things to be aware of, and I would say awareness is one of the most fundamental skills or resources to have and utilize in your life. There's a saying that awareness precedes control, and that's not to make life about control, but control, being able to affect the world in a way that serves you, is a fundamental part of life. And I would argue that at some level, just being aware is something that precedes change. You don't even necessarily have to consciously or in an intentional way try to change yourself. if you are aware of these signals, aware of these fundamental things that are the bedrock of what it is to be alive, I would say that if you become aware of what these signals mean and be mindful of that, you can follow them intuitively. And it's quite possible that lots of people already do this, but for me this was a very foreign thing, the idea that there's other things other than the mind that to listen to guide you in your journey of life. And I would say that just merely being aware of something is the first step of change and transformation. And just I come from a machine learning background, and the way that machine learning models or AI models learn is by taking in information. And I would say awareness is part of it's an implicit thing in that model. Anything that comes into the model as like a data part of the data set or what have you is something that the system is in a sense aware of. Awareness is a spotlight in some sense. It's like the thing that you can direct your attention to. Attention is a resource that is finite, presumably. Maybe it is infinite, I'm not really sure, but at least experientially it seems finite. There's only so many things that I can be aware of, that I can hold in my mind. Cognitive science has a lot of research around the number of things on average that someone can keep in their mind at one time. And of course people can push the limits of those things, but and it isn't really entirely clear if awareness is finite. I mean, analog systems are very different from digital systems. It's hard to count, let's say, the number of bits of information that are coming through an analog system. And I don't need to get into that, but it's just an open question about what is awareness. And then that's not the point of this conversation right now, but I'm just acknowledging that I don't know if awareness is finite or infinite. In some ways I would say that I can't imagine a proof of infinity, that something is truly infinite. Like, how would you know? You'd have to see it to the end, and there is no end to infinity. So it seems like even just logically there's not a clear way to measure infinity other than it being a concept. But I'm sure that there's probably very elaborate like systems of rationality that could sneak up to trying to prove something like that. I've recently thought about randomness and how if it's I think philosophically hard to imagine how someone might prove that something is truly random. In my mind, it seems like pseudo-randomness is similar to randomness. For example, the digits of pi are pseudo-random. The number of the percentage of how many ones, twos, and threes, etc. there are in pi is roughly uniformly distributed, and as you sample it, it approaches like a uniform distribution over those numbers. And still, like, each digit is uniquely defined. There is a 10,000th digit of pi, but the point I'm trying to make is that if I didn't know what pi was and I just saw these numbers coming through, I might presumably I might incorrectly believe that they were random. And so my question is an open question with anything that is like presumably a random source of information. How can you prove that it is random? I know there's ways to measure the entropy of a signal, for example, but it could be that deep down at the root of what that thing is, there is a um, non-random, um, computable way of determining the next step in the sequence. And in that sense, it wouldn't be random at all. But I do know that I read briefly about um, the Bell inequality in quantum physics, and about how I think that something about that has proven that there are sources of randomness in the universe. And I'm not qualified to understand that currently, but I'm at least open to the possibility that there is a way of proving something as general as randomness, even though it seems like, you know, hard to imagine how, just based on this way I've described it, that there is a definitive proof of something being random, because there's a sense of like uncertainty or unknowingness, and in the gap of what we know, which I think some people call the gap of God, there could be anything. There's what we know, and then what we don't know, the extent of all things knowable. And in that gap of where we stand, of what we see and what we measure and know, there's, in the unknown, potentially anything. And I'm sure there's gradations of knowing, and you could maybe say that, like, oh, I don't know this thing exactly, but there's like a range of possibilities, and it can't. So maybe in some versions of unknowing, there are like ranges, but I think in the most extreme sense, or extreme on the spectrum of unknowing, at the very end, there is a way in which unknowing is infinite possibility, infinite potential. And that kind of segues into something that I've been exploring recently, which is a spiritual community that I am a part of, called the Temple of the Sacred Womb. And it came into my life at a time when I really needed it. And there's something about the womb, about the feminine mission of creating life. And, of course, masculine and feminine together create life, but the feminine holds the portal of life. And in a way, like, the fact that we come into the world through the womb it's a remarkable thing. It's sort of like the Big Bang, from nothing something. And in the unknowing, in chaos, in the unmeasurable, in the thing yet to be modeled, there is a deep, beautiful potential for possibility. And in complete unknowing, there is infinite potential. And yeah, that is something that it comes to another idea that I've been exposed to, and I think is really powerful, which is the idea that it's kind of getting to the limits of science, and how I think science has been something that it's like a tool that we've really celebrated and leaned on, and done so without understanding its limitations. And a lot of this conversation, I would say, is a lesson in something else that I'd like to talk about later, called projection. When I say we, I really mean myself. It's a stand-in for myself. I am projecting my own experience onto this story that I'm telling. And if anything, it's more these statements are revealing about myself and not about the world at large, although I'd say a lot of what I'm saying is fundamental enough to apply to all of humanity. But anyways, so in my life, I leaned on science, on understanding, on modeling, so profoundly that it limited me. And I think that science is about understanding reproducible systems, or systems that are nearly reproducible. And there's some experiments that you can start the experiment from the beginning again and get the same results. It is a reproducible series of experience. But unlike these pockets of life that are reproducible, life in its entirety is not reproducible. In a strict sense, it is maybe, but what I mean by that is that it's evolving at a rate that I think you cannot model it entirely. And I think there's even that is like an open question, but I would argue that if you claimed that there was some system that modeled reality, I would think that at some basic logical way, how can this model itself? How can the compressor compress itself? And that also gets to something else that's interesting to me, which is control, and how I think control is, you're able to control something that you can compress, something that you can understand and simulate or perceive or project into the future faster than the thing itself. And systems in the universe are all evolving at a rate that's different. Some systems evolve faster than others. Some of them have higher entropy than others. And depending on how quickly you can model these things is, I think, a criterion for whether or not you can control something. It's at least a sufficient condition, not necessarily a it's a necessary condition, not necessarily a sufficient condition. But yeah, the Temple of the Sacred Womb is a place that taught me about the primordial nature of life and how we are transforming, we are evolving beings. Even in one lifetime, if you're open to it, you can transform into something that has never existed. And I think a lot of the world we live in has created a system for people to adopt social programming, to fit into a slot, to become another copy of this thing that the system can utilize. It's like a way of like we're like cells in this big body that is the planet, or like our social cultural system, and this thing is like churning out little cells and differentiating them into things that are useful for the whole body. And that's fine if like if you, in a way, like that is a path that is very what's the word, comfortable. If you work with this larger system, it will reward you. And we don't live in isolation. We are communal creatures. You can try to live in isolation, and maybe you can do so. There's definitely communities of people that try to live more like on the land, from their self-sufficiently. But the world we live in is very much interconnected and communal. Let me see, what, 40 minutes in. But there's another path, which is less about security and safety, which is this first path I was talking about, like just to become a cell in this body. Another path is to accept the potential of life to create something unique and different, and to not be normal, not to be and safety is in normality, but the potential of what human beings can be is very vast, and it's enough to where I think that we can all uniquely evolve and have a unique thing to contribute. Everyone has a uniqueness to contribute to um, our human experience. It is a very big tapestry that we're all um, threads that are uniquely woven together. You know, each person has their own life experience, and you know, perhaps you could say that some life experiences are similar enough, but no one person is exactly alike, and each person contributes something, even if it's very small in the magnitude sense, but um, everyone has a unique thing to offer. And so this other path is, I would say, about embracing the depth of what life can be, the depth of transformation, and to let yourself organically evolve. And that's something that I've been on that path recently. And it is not for the faint of heart. I do think that anyone can do their own small version of this. Um, but it's about letting go of control, letting go of complete control of your life, letting go of the idea of what your life is, and being open to changing. And I think that like a flower blooming, there is a natural progression to transformation in our souls and our beings. And we know a lot more about what the next step is than we would like to think. I've found that there's a lot of ways to get in touch with understanding the next step in your transformation. One of them is getting in touch with the subconscious mind, which I've been beginning to understand how potent and important that is. The subconscious mind is, I think, by many different metrics, much vaster, much bigger than our conscious mind. The conscious mind is like a spotlight that you're shining on something, so it's limited in that sense. But the subconscious mind is much bigger, and you are, I would argue, the summation or totality of those things. And being aware that that is a part of who you are, bringing the conscious mind and directing it towards the subconscious is a powerful way to close the loop, or to add a different form of awareness that will, again, precipitate change. So awareness precedes control. I think awareness also precedes change. You have to be aware of where you are to know where you want to go, or to be aware of what you are to understand the next step in your evolution. And so I've been very open to changing, and the things that I pay attention to in my life now are less about the thoughts or beliefs or judgments that I have about life, but more about the things that are, I think, deeper rooted and closer to life itself, like the heart space or your gut or feelings in your body. There's so many different things to pay attention to in the body. The body is very wise. It's not just a meat vehicle. It's not just a thing to get you from your office to your house. It is something that is worth honoring. And I've had a very beautiful and profound realignment in my life where I've honored my body in ways that I never did before. I see that in some ways it is, the mind is riding along with the body in a sense. Kind of like in Buddhism, there's this metaphor of there's a rider on top of an elephant, and the mind is like the rider and the elephant is the body. And it's important, I think, in this metaphor to realize that the mind is not the totality of what you are. You are at the very least both things. And you know, for me, the body is in some ways like a steed, or I like to think of mine as like a horse, or for some reason a donkey. And or there's so many different animals or spirit animals to, um, or even just taking it as it is without any projection like that or painting a different animalistic quality onto it. But I like to think of it like that. And my body wants to be free, wants to run around, wants to play, just like animals do. It doesn't want to be stuck and locked into this very, like, even now, like, if you think about it, um, I'm really being in the mind right now, not in my body as much as I'd like to, but it's the point of this is to convey information, so it is what it is. But um, my body, it definitely mine. I mean, everyone's relationship is different, but I had the sense that my body is patiently awaiting like an order, or like it's very disciplined. Like, we were trained early on in life to be disciplined like that. Sit down, be in class, pay attention, stop moving, sit still. And there's something powerful about that. But I think that, you know, there's a potential in this awareness of what you are to change. You know the rules before you break them. And I think that it's amazing that the body is so loyal or disciplined. Um, but also, like, I want my body to feel free. Sometimes it's fun to ask myself, like, what do my fingers want to do? They have a life of their own. And when I'm not paying attention to them, they're kind of dutifully or like patiently waiting for the next thing to do. And it's not to say that the fingers or whatever, any part of the body is like, um, I don't know, a completely separate thing, but there's gradations of connection and separation. There's a whole set of things that um, I would say make up the totality of what you are. There are your feelings, there's the things that you are sensing, there are your body, there's your memories, there are the people you encounter. And all of these things, to greater or lesser degree, are things that you associate with. And I would argue that what you are, to be the most, what's the word? To be the most concrete and have a complete picture of what you are, is that there's like a gradation map or like a field of association. And what you are currently, by definition, you could create this, is the set of things that you associate with. And depending on what you're paying attention to, you can associate to lots of things. You could associate to, oh, I am my voice, or oh, I am my body, or I am my feelings. And I would say that none of those are wrong answers. And in a way, I would say that we are connected or associated to everything in the universe in some ways. And in spirituality, there's a lot of different religions or spiritual systems that will talk about how we are everything and we are nothing. We are all of life, we are emptiness. And they're all matters of perspective. And if you think about this thing I'm talking about, which is a very complex thing, by the way, if you were to somehow actually describe it, I think it would be very hard to do. There's like the things that you more or less associate with or are connected to. For example, I would say that by this definition, you are more your, let's say you're close with your mother. You are more your mother than you are someone half the world away in, I don't know, in a different country. You are more your friend than you are, I don't know, a star in a faraway galaxy. But it's not to say that you aren't any of those things. It's just a matter of degree, or it's a qualification of how much you are that thing. And interestingly, when you think of it in this way, I would say that you are more your enemy as well as your friend you are both of those things more than you are someone that you have very little connection with, in terms of like you meet them and there's a neutral or neutrality that you experience them with. In psychology, they say if you spot it, you got it. And people that affect you positively or negatively are both deep signals of who you are or what you are. And it's not to say that that's entirely true. You know, I think everything is complicated, and there's different levels of understanding. You know, the Taylor series expansion, the first few terms are maybe enough to approximate it. This is an approximation to say that you spot it, you got it, but it's very powerful to pay attention to the things in your life that affect you. They are very strong signals of awareness. And that kind of gets to another topic that I want to talk about, which is projection. Projection is a very powerful part of being a human being, and I think it's a number of things, but I think that projection is important specifically to being a human, to being a Homo sapien versus other animals, is because of the degree to which we imitate. And of course, I think other animals, I think all of life imitates. I think it is a route to learning, to start the learning process. I think imitation is a bootstrapping mechanism. It's a very simple thing to get the process started. I think that in a way, when we're trying to make sense of anything, we are trying to imitate it in a way. Like, for example, when we're born, we're getting all this sensory information about the world, seeing our family. At that time, it doesn't have a label like that, but it's just something that's coming into you. You're this sort of blank canvas, and things are coming in, and you're trying to make sense of them. And to navigate in the world, it's useful to have a model of the world itself. And so we learn to model, and then again, awareness precedes control. Modeling leads to understanding, leads to control. We learn to control things in our life, like making sure that your fridge is full of food, or making sure that you get to places on time. And so I think that imitation is at the root of all of life. Anything that resembles life, I think, has a form of imitation when it comes to maybe even just the basic senses. Like, how do you make sense of the world around you without creating a model, which is in a way a small imitation of what the world is? And that kind of gets to this other idea that comes from Hermeticism and also like really old spiritual systems. So within, so without, that you are a reflection of the world itself. And gets to like fractals and how life is self-similar, meaning that factors or patterns that happen inside of me happen in the world at large. And you can go down levels of, scale, physical scale, or I'm sure there's all sorts of scales that you can talk about. But for example, a cell is self-similar to the body in some sense, which is self-similar to a culture or a society. It's, I think, fair to call a community like a body, and each person in the community is like a cell that's interacting, and it forms this bigger thing. And we are not just creatures that are individualistic and separate. And yeah, cells have boundaries, and so does our physical body. The skin is like the most outer part of our physical boundaries, but then there's also emotional boundaries and psychic boundaries and other things like that. So anyways, I think projection is related to this idea of how we are self-similar to life, and we are a microcosm of the macrocosm, and there are self-similar patterns. And projection is also related to imitation, and we are better imitators than we're more advanced imitators than other species. I think maybe that's not even fair to say. It's more that we have multiple levels of imitation. The big thing that I think that makes us separate is our ability to have shared fictions or shared stories about reality. And that's something that I've picked up from the book *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, or whatever his name is, Yuval Harari. I don't know, Yuval Noah Harari, and I'm gonna stop for a second.